I started my leadership journey when I was 18. Practically everyone I was responsible for leading at that time was much older than I was, and usually they were also more experienced. It was confusing, frustrating, and even awkward at times to be the leader in that kind of context. And there were days I experienced crippling insecurity about my age, my lack of experience. I had full on imposter syndrome, but I was able to more or less overcome this challenge. Now I'm in a different season of leadership. I don't have the same struggles today. However, I will not forget how hard that season of emerging leadership was. My heart goes out to you. If you're experiencing this right now, it's a challenging position to be in, and I would love to offer you some thoughts today that I hope will really serve you. Over the last 15 years since I first started, I've observed 7 foundational principles that have proven to be highly effective for overcoming age barriers in leadership. And some of these principles, I've stumbled across myself, others I've observed and learned from others in leadership. Some of these principles I learned from my successes, and others I learned from my mistakes. But in any case, these 7 principles, in my mind, are the key to overcoming age barriers in leadership. Now, before we jump into today's content, I invite you to download my free leadership resource list. It's linked below, or if you're listening via podcast, you can go to the website, zackwhite.com, and you can find it there. I only post new episodes once a week, so this resource list is my way of getting an additional playbook into your hands between our weekly time together, and I really hope it serves you. All right, let's dive in. Here is the first principle for overcoming age barriers. Anchor your leadership to mission, vision, and values. Anchor your leadership to mission, vision, and values. Now, I'm assuming that your business or organization does have some sort of mission statement, some sort of vision for the future, or values that you collectively operate by. But if not, well, that is a problem for another episode, okay? But if you're a leader, particularly a young leader, it's absolutely imperative that you anchor your leadership to the mission, vision, and values. Why? Because they provide authority and credibility and depth to your leadership in a way that supersedes a lack of age, experience, or tenure. Mission, vision, and values, assuming they're good, stand the test of time. They rise above generational divides and transitions, and they act as a powerful governing force that aligns the organization and drives the collective body of individuals forward in unity. And when you anchor your leadership in mission, vision, and values, the why behind your decision making is not driven by you or your personal opinion, but by the collective pursuit of the organization's mission, vision, and values. Now, this is important for any leader, but it's especially important for you if you're young and inexperienced. A lot of young leaders, including myself growing up, feel like they need to prove themselves, act like they have it all together, act like they have all the answers, or even put a fake front of confidence forward. And this just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work. It creates all sorts of issues, and it doesn't ultimately encourage collective buy-in from the team you lead. So please don't go this route, all right? Instead, all you need is to internalize the mission, vision, and values that drive your organization forward, and then lead people toward that. Anchoring your leadership to that is what ultimately brings authority, credibility, and depth to your leadership. Okay, that's first. Second, show respect before you ever expect to receive any. I remember there was a team member that I was really struggling with early on. He was about 20 years older than me. He had more experience than I did at the time, but I was in a leadership position. And the first time I worked with this guy, I could tell he had zero respect for me. And looking back, it's clear to me now that there was probably an ego issue. But at the same time, I was super young, super inexperienced, and I understood even then why he didn't respect me yet. Man, I struggled for months with this guy. He had an attitude towards me. He questioned my decisions constantly, and he made it clear he didn't trust my judgment. And it was absolutely miserable. It really was. And worse, the rest of my team at that time started to pick up on it. And eventually, it became evident to me that I really needed to do something about this guy. I can't let this continue. So I decided to go to him directly and talk through the issue. And I knew that I needed to try a different strategy. I remember I went to him privately one day and I said, "Hey, I want you to know that I really value and respect you and your ideas and experience. And I just wanted to ask if you have any ideas or feedback that might help the team or help me as I strive to grow my leadership. I really care about this team and I want to lead it well. And your input would really mean a lot to me." And I kid you not, this guy turned into a different person. It was like a total 180. We talked for over an hour and he offered some really great advice that I found helpful and eventually implemented. And I was able to talk to him about how I sensed that some negativity was bringing our team down and that I needed his support. He actually got really vulnerable about his own insecurities and he apologized for some of his behavior. And then he was supportive and he said a bunch of encouraging things. You know what? By the end of that meeting, he was thanking me. Now, from that day on, he showed me the utmost respect as the leader. And I learned a powerful lesson through that experience. You have to show respect before you ever expect to receive any. This guy who used to be a nightmare for me turned out to be a delight. He really did. He just needed to feel respected. Okay, number 3, be the most passionate person in the room. Passion is interesting. There are a lot of definitions out there, but here's what I mean by passion. I view passion as deeply and intensely caring about something. So when I say be the most passionate person in the room, I really mean be the person who cares the most. When you bring that kind of passion, people can't help but listen. Passion arrests the attention of everyone in the room. People feel it. People are moved by it. People respect it. Again, it doesn't matter what your age, experience, or tenure is. People are willing to follow passionate people because they intuitively know how deeply you care. They feel it. Now, here's the catch. You can't fake passion. You can't. You're either passionate about something or you're not, and everybody knows it. So if you're not feeling passionate at the moment with what you're doing or where you are, then you need to start there and discover why. You need to look under the hood a little bit. What is it that you can get passionate about? Find that and then start there. All right, number 4, show up early and be the last one to leave. Now, this seems so simple, and yet it's so often ignored. Earlier this year, we brought on a temporary intern on my team, and I started noticing that this guy was regularly showing up early and even offering to stay late when he sensed a need. And you know what this communicated to me? That this was more than just a job to him, that he was willing to go the extra mile. It communicated that he cared. And it also gave me confidence in his leadership capability. I felt like I could trust him. He has since been promoted from an intern to a full staff member, which makes sense. He really earned that. The point is, if you're young and untested, there's practically no better way to gain recognition and respect as a leader than to show up early and be the last one to leave. It communicates something to the people around you. It really does. It can also be equally detrimental to your leadership to do the opposite. If you show up consistently late, or if you're rushing out the door as soon as you can, you're not just communicating things about your work ethic and all that. You're communicating that you don't care and that you're not willing to go the extra mile. And people will have a hard time putting their confidence in you if they sense that. This is certainly not the same thing as having a healthy work-life balance. That's not at all what I'm talking about. That's an entirely different issue. What we're talking about is having a spirit that is willing to take the hill with your fellow soldiers when the need arises. That is very different than just clock in, clock out kind of behavior. If you're willing to go above and beyond expectations, it builds trust. And leadership is built on trust. Okay, number 5, shut up and listen. No, I'm not talking to you and saying shut up to you, but I'm saying that's number 5, shut up and listen. Have you ever said something in a meeting that you feel like was just really dumb, right? Maybe you responded to something too soon before you even had a chance to think about it. And then what you end up saying just sounds unprofessional or foolish. We've all done this, right? If you are a young leader, you might think that you need to talk more to be noticed or respected. You might need to like come up with an answer to questions and things like that. But it's actually the opposite, I think. And I struggled with this for a long time in my early years until I read some really valuable advice that really changed the game for me. It's actually in the Bible, in the book of James, one of my favorite books in the Bible. And it says, be quick to listen, slow to speak. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. It changed my life. It really did. Seriously, it's so simple, yet it's so powerful. When I'm in a conversation or a meeting or anything like that, I try to practice the discipline of listening before I speak. And yes, it is a discipline. It's incredible how hard it can be to just shut up and listen, really. So, what I try to do is defer the conversation as long as I can to let the other person or people, whoever's there, talk. I'll usually ask questions to get more of their thoughts out on the table. And meanwhile, I just listen. I just listen. And I'm not trying to formulate what I'm going to say yet. I'm just trying to take in all the information, all of the emotions, all of their context. And then once I've done this, I've found that whatever my response might be to it all is always, without fail, stronger, wiser, more empathetic than what I would have said if I had just spoken right out of the gates. Without fail. All I have to do is just shut up and listen. It's such a simple yet powerful way to be a leader who regularly speaks with wisdom beyond your years. All right, let's move on to number 6. Do your research. I love this. All right. You may be young and inexperienced, but it's hard to argue with solid research. I've noticed a pretty obvious correlation in my own experience between time spent in research and quality of leadership. The better my research, the better my leadership. And, there are few things more impressive than when one of my team members comes to me with solid research on a particular topic or decision. It gives me so much confidence in them and their leadership. And I feel like I didn't know, honestly, what solid research looked like until I was in graduate school. That's when I really began to understand, man, how important it is to do your research. Shallow research leads to shallow results, and you can't lead from a shallow place. I love what Albert Einstein said. He said, if we knew what it was we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? In other words, research is the process of transitioning from not knowing what we're doing to being confident in what we're doing and the decisions we make. I want to repeat that. Research is the process of transitioning from not knowing what we're doing to being confident in what we're doing and the decisions we make. Not to mention, when we've done our research, it not only builds our own confidence as a leader, but it also helps the ones you lead have confidence in you. So, do your research. Number 7, and this is the last one, okay? Soak this in. This is the most important one. Have unquestionable integrity. I recently did an entire episode on integrity. I'll link to it in the description. I'm passionate about integrity because I believe that integrity is the only right way to rise up into leadership, the only way to sustain exceptional leadership, and the only way to leave a lasting legacy as a leader. Does that sound too dramatic? Well, if you're interested in hearing why, I encourage you to check out that episode next. I'll see you over there. Keep fighting the good fight.